Good morning, everyone. It is Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020. I'm Keith Tebow. Thank you for joining us on another summary Tuesday in Greater Fall River. You know, we've talked a lot over the past few months about the importance of the U.S. Census, the decennial census, which has gone out since beginning of April to people across the country to get an accurate count of our citizens across the United States. Well, in the city of Fall River, the city conducts a census every year. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, it was delayed a little bit, but now we are ready to conduct the Fall River City Census, and there may be some confusion between the two censuses. And we're bringing in now the chairperson of the city's Board of Elections, Kelly Souza-Young, to talk about the city census. Kelly, how are you? Welcome.
Good, and yourself, Keith?
I am doing well. So let's talk about the city census. Now, this is something that is done every year, correct? And it's also equally as important as the national census in terms of getting an important count of who lives here in the city, correct?
Correct. We have like you had said, we usually do it in March of the year, but because of COVID, we had to delay it all the way till June, but it is in full force right now. Basically, we have, our annual census. Yes, we have to have a lot of people count. It's for funding. If you need any proof of residency, let's say for the motor vehicle registration, you to get your license, you would need that as well to show that you are a resident of Fall River.
Now, excuse me, I'm sure there are some people who are confused, right, about the U.S. Census going out back, I believe it was April 1st when they officially launched, and now the city census. I bet you're already getting calls from people saying, why do I need to do this twice, right? Isn't once enough? And how do you answer those questions?
Correct. We are getting, well, I already filled it out, and we try to tell them, well, that is the federal census that they send out every 10 years, which is different from our city census, which state mandates us to send it out every year, just so we have an accurate count for our voting lists, as well as, like I said, state funding.
And what is the we've talked about this. We do this interview every year about the city census to make sure people are informed. But if they do not take part in the city census, does that impact them at all? Say when it comes to election, even though it's a state election this year, a presidential election, but in Fall River we have elections every year with the odd years being the city election. Does that impact at all potentially people needing to vote this fall if they don't take part in the city census?
Correct. Well, if they don't take part of the city census, what they would do is they would become inactive, which basically means they would have to show an ID to the warden or clerk at the polling place to be able to vote. It's just a second step to say, yes, I do still live in Fall River, or maybe I moved to Westport, or I didn't bring an ID, where they would have to have an oath to say that they either still live in Fall River or that they moved.
Now, are the questions that are asked on the city census, are they somewhat similar in terms of the federal census? You want to find out who's living in a household, how many people, any age range. I guess my question is, what questions are a little different in the city census that may not be found in the U.S. Census or vice versa?
Well, the U.S. Census, I think, doesn't ask if you're a veteran, if you have any dogs. That's basically our city census, but we pretty much have the same thing: name, birth date, if you're a voter. I think that's another thing that's not on the annual the federal census. They're more basic than we are. We ask a lot more questions than they do.
And again, like the U.S. Census, it's important on the city level for people to take part in the city census, because as with the federal census, part of it is representation in terms of Congress, but also getting federal money into the state and then into Fall River. This city census, I believe, impacts how the city gets some funding from the state. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. So if we have the more people, especially children, I know that that's a big thing. People only think they have to count the voters in the household or the adults, but the children also count as well, because that's funding for schools.
Yeah, that's very important. All right. We published on our website the release you sent out yesterday about the census starting. Is there a deadline for people to take part in the city census, and how do people get it back to the city?
Well, there's a couple of ways you can get it back to the city. One we're going to try new this year. We're going to have a blank form on our website. We just have to set it up first, and what they can do, it's fillable. You can fill it out, send it back to us, make sure you sign it, and we can update it there. We also have Stop and Shop, Shores, both Stop and Shops, Ciabras, and Shops Market, or you can also drop it off here at Government Center. We have a box outside because you're not able to come into the building, and then we also have by mail.
Deadline again for people to take part.
Okay.
Is there a hard deadline?
Yes, well, there's not really a hard deadline. We're hoping to get them all back. Like I said, because of COVID, where everything got pushed back, so we're hoping to get them all back by August 12th, which is actually the last day to register to vote or do any changes on your account.
Yeah. And let's go back about why it was delayed. COVID-19 hit in the middle of March, and normally, March is the time, as you mentioned, when the census would go out. And I believe you told me, in one of our previous interviews, that it had to do with actually physically printing the forms. The company was out of business, if you will, during COVID. Is that the main reason why?
Correct. They weren't considered an essential employees. The manufacturing company, so they basically were shut down during COVID.
So I would think that would have impacted all the communities in Massachusetts, right? That are mandated to do local census. If printers are down, they couldn't get that as well, right?
Correct.
I want to get back to what you just talked about in terms of a deadline. You had mentioned August 12th. That's a target deadline. That's also an opportunity for people to register to vote for the last time in advance of the September 1st primary. The primary is a little earlier this year. It's actually before Labor Day. A lot of times it would be right after Labor Day, but here in Massachusetts, it is September 1st is the primary date, and people have until the 12th to register. How can people register to vote? You mentioned that the office is now open. It's been open for the past few weeks, but how can people find out more about registering to vote for the September 1st primary?
Okay, so that day we will be open till 8 o'clock. Because of COVID, I'm not sure how we're going to handle it. We might have to just sit downstairs to register people to vote until 8 o'clock at night. They can also mail it in. They can drop it off at the drop box outside, and they can also register online through the Secretary of State's office, and then they can also go to the Registry of Motor Vehicles and register to vote when they renew their license.
I know we're still, it's actually about 2 months away before the primary date, but as of right now, are we expected just to have an election as normal? I mean, I know there's been a lot of talk in the legislature about more mail-in ballots. I guess, what have you heard, and how could it potentially impact Fall River?
Well, as it stands right now, that's also what I've heard. Right now, I think it went back to conference. So we're expecting a week of early voting starting August 22nd to the 25th or the last Friday before the election. It's a week of early voting. Plus, we're also expecting early voting ballots, mail-in ballots, and plus we already have a large amount of absentee ballots, which they're allowing because of COVID.
Right. And in terms of the early voting, I remember having this discussion with you during the presidential primary. Will it just be one location again at Government Center that will be the early location voting for that week prior to Election Day?
Correct. We normally try to have it right in Government Center because it's the biggest space that we have where we can have all 9 wards at Government Center.
Right. And I'm sure that'll be something that will be again up for discussion. Hopefully we won't see another wave or a surge in COVID-19, which may impact elections, but we'll hopefully just move forward. Kelly Souza-Young, I appreciate your time as always. We'll talk again soon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Keith. Have a great day.
You too. And I want to thank you for joining us at FRCmedia as we continue to provide updates on Facebook as well as on Channel 95. So for all of us here at FRCmedia, I'm Keith Tebow. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.